It was 1943. The world stood ablaze. Europe was a fortress of fire, the Pacific a storm of steel and salt. The sky, once a symbol of freedom, had become a brutal battleground where men and machines danced with death. Amidst the roaring engines and blinding tracer fire, the legends were already being written. The Mustang, the Thunderbolt, the Hellcat, names that would echo through history. But somewhere in the shadow of these giants, another warrior flew, quieter, overlooked and underestimated. It was not the fastest nor the most glamorous. It didn't grace the covers of wartime propaganda or star in patriotic newsreels. Yet in forgotten skies over jungles, oceans and enemy territory, it carried out missions that few dared to attempt. It fought with courage, persistence and resilience, and though its name would fade from the headlines, its service whispered a deeper truth, that greatness isn't always loud, and heroism doesn't always wear a crown. This is the story of America's most underrated combat plane of World War II, a machine forged in necessity, refined in combat, and remembered only by those who saw it defy the impossible. In the shadows of history's most famous warbirds, it was the unsung workhorse that held the line, saved lives, and changed the outcome of battles few even remember. The skies had their legends, but this was the legend no one spoke. When historians spoke of American air power in World War II, certain names instantly commanded reverence. The P-51 Mustang, the B-17 Flying Fortress, the P-47 Thunderbolt. These were the icons, the headline machines of victory. Yet beneath their thunderous fame, another aircraft carried the burden of relentless warfare without recognition. The Douglas A-20 Havoc, known also to the British and Commonwealth forces as the Boston. Developed in the late 1930s, the A-20 emerged at a time when the United States was still neutral and the world was sliding toward catastrophe. The design was born from necessity, an aircraft that could bomb, strafe, and attack at low altitude with speed and precision. It was compact, sleek, and ferociously adaptable. The prototype, first flown in 1938, demonstrated characteristics that impressed test pilots immediately: quick acceleration, smooth control response, and remarkable agility for a twin-engine machine. While the Army Air Corps initially hesitated, foreign nations did not. France, already at war in 1939, ordered hundreds of A-20s before America itself adopted the type. When France fell, Britain took over those orders, renaming the plane the Boston and soon sending it into combat against Nazi Germany. The aircraft's role expanded quickly. Light bomber, night intruder, ground attack platform. Pilots discovered that it could take punishment far beyond its design limits. Its two Wright R-2600 Cyclone radial engines, each producing more than 1,600 horsepower, propelled the Havoc to speeds over 330 miles per hour, an impressive figure for a low-level attacker. By 1942, the United States Army Air Forces began using the A-20 under its original name, Havoc. It became the backbone of numerous light bomber squadrons, fighting in every major theater. In North Africa, it raced across the desert sky, hitting German supply lines, smashing Rommel's convoys, and blasting through enemy fortifications with ruthless precision. In Europe, it flew alongside British units during early daylight raids, striking communication lines and railway hubs that fed the German war machine. And in the Pacific, it adapted once again, flying from makeshift island runways, attacking Japanese airfields, convoys, and jungle strongholds. The A-20's reputation grew quietly among those who relied on it most, the pilots and crews who knew its resilience firsthand. Many described it as forgiving yet fierce. It could dive hard, pull up low, and roll like a fighter. Ground crews respected its sturdy frame, which absorbed heavy punishment yet kept returning home. Its twin engines provided redundancy. If one was hit, the other could still bring the crew back. This reliability made it a favorite for missions where survival odds were uncertain. The aircraft's construction was deceptively simple but robust. Its narrow fuselage, tricycle landing gear, and compact wings gave it an aggressive, almost predatory appearance. Inside, space was tight, just enough for the pilot, bombardier, and gunner to work in coordinated efficiency. The cockpit layout was functional, visibility excellent. Many pilots commented that the Havoc handled more like a fighter than a bomber, with crisp control surfaces and surprising agility at low altitude. Its bomb load, typically up to 2,000 pounds, could be configured for various missions. Fragmentation bombs for troop concentrations, general-purpose bombs for shipping, or incendiaries for storage depots. Its forward-firing machine guns, often 6 to 8 .150 caliber weapons mounted in the nose, made it a formidable strafing platform. Later variants carried additional guns in the dorsal and ventral positions, giving the A-20 formidable defensive firepower against enemy fighters. The aircraft's operational flexibility became its defining trait. When units transitioned from Europe to North Africa or from New Guinea to the Philippines, the A-20 required minimal adaptation. These missions often lasted for hours in tropical heat, with pilots enduring dehydration, exhaustion, and the ever-present threat of enemy flak. Yet mission after mission the Havoc performed without fail. In New Guinea, squadrons such as the 89th Attack Squadron became synonymous with the A-20's legacy. Their aircraft bore colourful nose art and nicknames: Hell's Fire, a big-ass bird, a tough titty. These weren't decorations of vanity, they were personal emblems of survival. Every name carried the weight of dozens of missions flown under relentless danger. One notable aspect of the Havoc service was its relatively low attrition rate compared to other light bombers. Its speed and low-level agility allowed it to evade much of the anti-aircraft fire that tore through slower bombers. Pilots often credited the A-20's tricycle landing gear, uncommon at the time, for making landings smoother and safer, even on damaged runways. The aircraft's adaptability also extended beyond combat. Some were converted into reconnaissance and target tug variants. Others served as trainers for multi-engine transition courses. A handful were even modified to test radar systems and other electronic equipment. This versatility kept the A-20 relevant long after newer designs entered service. However, by late 1944 and into 1945, the Douglas A-26 Invader began to replace the A-20 in frontline units. The Invader offered greater range, payload, and speed, a natural evolution of the Havoc's design philosophy. As the war drew toward its end, A-20s were gradually reassigned to secondary duties or retired altogether. By the time Japan surrendered in 1945, over 7,000 A-20 Havocs had been built. They had flown in every major combat zone, under countless flags, in missions few remembered but many owed their success to. In postwar years, most were scrapped, their aluminum recycled, their names forgotten. Only a handful survived in museums and collections, silent reminders of the unsung workhorse that helped win the air war. The Douglas A-20 Havoc story was not one of fame or spectacle. It was a machine designed for a purpose and executed that purpose with unwavering precision. It represented an era when aircraft were built not for glory but for endurance, to do the work no one else could. It proved that the measure of an aircraft's greatness lay not in how many stories were told about it, but in how many lives it saved, how many missions it completed, and how faithfully it performed its duty. As time passed, the A-20's legacy endured quietly through those who had flown it. Veterans remembered it as fast, rugged, and dependable. Maintenance crews recalled its straightforward systems and easy repair. Historians, looking back, began to recognize its critical role in the early years of the war. As the bridge between the pre-war light bombers and the modern tactical aircraft that would follow. It was not built to dominate headlines, it was built to win wars, and in that it succeeded completely.
By 1943, the Douglas A-20 Havoc had matured into one of the most adaptable combat aircraft in the Allied arsenal. Its transformation from a light bomber into a true multi-role workhorse was a result not of design evolution alone, but of necessity. Every front demanded different capabilities: night strikes over Europe, convoy attacks in the Mediterranean, jungle warfare in the Pacific, and supply interdictions over the Eastern Front. The Havoc answered all of them with efficiency and quiet competence. The aircraft's twin Wright R2600 engines, delivering over 1,600 horsepower each, gave it the acceleration and climb rate needed to survive in some of the war's most dangerous conditions. For a light bomber, it could match or exceed the speed of many enemy fighters during low-level attack runs. Its typical combat speed of 330 to 340 miles per hour made it one of the fastest medium-weight attack aircraft of its class. Combined with a rugged airframe and easily maintained systems, it quickly earned the trust of commanders and crews across multiple theaters. The A-20's versatility made it invaluable to both tactical and strategic operations. In Europe, RAF squadrons flying the Boston variant conducted Intruder and Night Strike missions, low-level attacks on enemy airfields, rail junctions, and industrial zones in occupied France and the Low Countries. Using primitive early radar systems like AIM-KIV, these aircraft located and attacked German bombers as they returned from missions, catching them in the most vulnerable moments of flight. The Havoc's speed and maneuverability made it ideal for such operations, where surprise and precision mattered more than heavy payloads. In daylight operations, A-20 units performed low-altitude raids that disrupted enemy supply lines across Western Europe. These missions required absolute precision flying. Crews often skimmed just above treetop level to avoid radar detection, dropping their payloads at near-suicidal ranges. Anti-aircraft guns, camouflaged along roads and fields, created a wall of fire that only speed and agility could penetrate. The A-20's compact design minimized its target profile, allowing it to weave through flak bursts and return to base with damage that would have destroyed less durable aircraft. In North Africa, the A-20's adaptability became a strategic asset. The vast, open deserts demanded aircraft that could travel long distances, strike quickly, and endure harsh conditions. The Havoc's air-cooled radial engines proved resilient against the dust and heat that plagued liquid-cooled fighters. Squadrons operating from forward bases near El Alamein, Kasserine Pass, and Tunis used A-20s to attack German convoys, artillery positions, and tank concentrations. Their missions directly supported the Allied ground offensives that eventually forced the Axis retreat from North Africa. Maintenance crews valued the Havoc's simplicity. Its modular systems allowed rapid field repairs, often in primitive desert workshops. A damaged wing section could be replaced in hours, engine swaps were routine. Unlike heavier bombers that required large maintenance depots, the A-20 could be serviced under canvas tents with minimal tools. This logistical advantage allowed it to remain operational in environments where other aircraft were grounded by dust storms or mechanical fatigue. In the Mediterranean theater, the A-20 continued its shadow war. During the Sicilian and Italian campaigns, Havocs flew countless interdiction sorties. Their objective was to cripple the Axis supply network feeding the front lines. By destroying bridges, trains, and fuel depots, they choked the enemy's logistical arteries. Records from the 47th Bombardment Group detail hundreds of sorties flown in close coordination. With ground forces, often at dangerously low altitude, enemy positions were struck minutes ahead of advancing troops, a tactic that blurred the line between air support and direct engagement. The A-20's performance was equally impressive in the Pacific. Under General George C. Kenney's 5th Air Force, based in Australia and New Guinea, it became the centerpiece of low-level attack tactics. Pilots stripped their aircraft of unnecessary weight, removed the bomb bay doors for faster release, and sometimes replaced the bombardiers stationed with extra ammunition or additional forward guns. These modifications gave the A-20 an entirely new combat identity. The Pacific environment demanded endurance and precision. Missions often stretched across vast distances of ocean, jungle, and mountain terrain. Navigation relied on basic maps, compasses, and the experience of the pilot. When A-20 formations located Japanese shipping convoys, attacks were launched in synchronized waves, one element diving on anti-aircraft positions, another strafing decks, and a third dropping fragmentation bombs along the convoy route. At Leh, Wewak, and Rabaul, the A-20 played a critical role in neutralizing Japanese air power. Flying at altitudes sometimes below 200 feet, crews attacked parked aircraft, fuel dumps, and storage depots with relentless accuracy. The A-20G variant, armed with 6 forward-firing .50 caliber machine guns, turned into a formidable gunship capable of devastating targets in seconds. Pilots described seeing their tracers carve through hangars and enemy aircraft with terrifying effect. Perhaps one of the most remarkable aspects of the A-20's Pacific service was its survivability. The dense tropical conditions, combined with heavy anti-aircraft fire and limited infrastructure, created an environment where attrition rates were expected to be high. Yet the Havoc's robust design kept losses relatively low. Pilots frequently returned with significant structural damage, bullet holes through the fuselage, shrapnel lodged in the wings, hydraulic failures, yet the aircraft continued to perform. In the Southwest Pacific, the Havoc's ability to carry mixed ordnance loads made it the ideal aircraft for combined attack missions. It could deliver general-purpose bombs and still retain its full gun complement. Pilots often loaded parafrags, small parachute-equipped fragmentation bombs, that could saturate a wide area with explosive force. These were particularly effective against enemy infantry and light vehicles hidden in jungle terrain. The A-20 also served in maritime strike roles, hunting Japanese shipping lanes and troop transports. In coordinated attacks with B-25 Mitchells and P-38 Lightnings, Havocs targeted smaller vessels, strafing decks and disabling cargo holds. Their speed allowed them to evade escort fighters and retreat at low altitude, hugging the ocean surface until radar contact was lost. The psychological effect of these attacks on enemy crews was considerable. Reports from captured Japanese sailors described them as lightning strikes from nowhere. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, the Soviet Union employed the A-20 in massive numbers through the Lend-Lease program. The Soviets received over 3,000 aircraft, most of which served on the Eastern Front. There, they were used for night bombing, ground support, and reconnaissance. Soviet pilots appreciated the A-20's reliability and rugged construction. Unlike some Western aircraft that struggled in extreme cold, the A-20's engines performed consistently in sub-zero conditions. Crews improvised heaters and field modifications, but the airframe itself proved remarkably resistant to the snow, ice, and mud of the front. Soviet tactics often differed from Western use. Rather than low-level attacks, many Soviet A-20 units operated in medium-altitude bombing formations, targeting German supply depots, bridges, and troop concentrations. The aircraft's defensive armament, combined with its speed, allowed it to survive even when intercepted by German fighters. Soviet records indicate that A-20s frequently returned to base with severe battle damage, missing tail sections, punctured fuel tanks, and shattered control surfaces, yet remained flyable. This resilience solidified the aircraft's reputation as a dependable partner in a brutal theater of war. The Havoc's contributions to radar and electronic warfare were also significant. The A-20J and A-20K variants were equipped with radar for pathfinding and weather reconnaissance, guiding larger bomber formations to their targets through cloud and darkness. These modified Havocs operated in tandem with heavy bombers like the B-24 Liberator and B-17 Flying Fortress, providing navigation data and early radar returns. Back in the European theater, A-20 units continued to perform interdiction missions in preparation for Operation Overlord, the D-Day invasion. In the months leading up to June 1944, Havocs targeted French railways, supply convoys, and coastal defenses. Their goal was to disrupt the German response capacity before Allied troops landed. The 416th Bomb Group alone flew hundreds of sorties against rail lines feeding into Normandy. Many of these missions were conducted in marginal weather, with visibility sometimes reduced to a few hundred feet. Crews depended entirely on training and intuition to hit their objectives. The Havoc's design allowed it to absorb steady improvements throughout its service life. Upgraded engines, better armor protection, and improved gun turrets extended its relevance even as newer aircraft entered production. The A-20G and A-20J represented the pinnacle of the type, optimized for both day and night operations. By 1944, as Allied forces advanced deeper into Europe, A-20s were often assigned to tactical air commands supporting ground units. In France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, they operated from hastily built forward airstrips, striking retreating German columns. Their low-altitude runs were so effective that some German troops mistook them for fighters. The aircraft's blistering forward firepower decimated convoys, destroying vehicles and scattering infantry across open terrain. In Italy, A-20s of the 47th and 12th Air Forces performed continuous bombing and strafing runs during the advance up the peninsula. At Monte Cassino, Havocs struck enemy supply lines and artillery positions hidden in mountain valleys. Their ability to deliver bombs with surgical accuracy made them indispensable for supporting ground offensives in difficult terrain. Throughout its career, the A-20 maintained a rare balance between performance and practicality. It could not match the bomb load of larger aircraft or the range of strategic bombers, but it compensated with speed, versatility, and ease of use. Its smaller logistical footprint meant that squadrons could operate independently with minimal infrastructure, a crucial advantage in the fast-moving fronts of 1943 and 1944. By the closing months of World War II, the Douglas A-20 had completed its evolution from a prototype light bomber into one of the most capable and resilient multi-role aircraft of the conflict. It had adapted to nearly every mission profile imaginable: bomber, attack aircraft, night fighter, pathfinder, and reconnaissance platform. Yet despite its enormous contribution, the Havoc remained largely unheralded. Its missions were not the grand, city-leveling raids of the B-17s or B-29s. They were tactical, targeted, and often invisible to the public. But among the men who flew and maintained them, the A-20 earned unwavering respect. It was dependable, powerful, and endlessly versatile, a machine that embodied the industrial efficiency and practical ingenuity of American wartime design. The Douglas A-20 Havoc stood as proof that true power in warfare often came not from the most famous machines, but from the ones that quietly carried the burden every day, the shadow workhorses that never failed, never faltered, and never asked for recognition. By the end of World War II, the Douglas A-20 Havoc had flown in nearly every theater of conflict, across oceans, deserts, jungles, and frozen landscapes. Its career spanned over 6 years of relentless warfare, yet its contributions remained largely unrecognized in mainstream histories of the air war. Unlike the P-51 Mustang or the B-17 Flying Fortress, which were immortalized in newsreels, photographs, and post-war accounts, the A-20 existed quietly, fulfilling its missions without fanfare. Its legacy, however, was etched into the very victories it enabled, the ground troops it supported, and the crews it carried home alive from the most perilous operations. The Havoc's post-war journey reflected both the triumph and the obscurity of its service. Thousands of aircraft were decommissioned, stripped of usable parts, and sold for scrap. Entire fleets, once symbols of tactical innovation and resilience, were reduced to piles of aluminum in scrapyards across the United States and Europe. Some were repurposed for civilian roles, including cargo transport, mail delivery, or even aerial survey work, but few retained the combat configuration that had made them so effective. Museum curators and aviation historians would later recover only a handful of surviving examples, silent sentinels of a forgotten era, with chipped paint, faded nose art, and airframes that bore the scars of wartime service. Despite the scarcity of surviving aircraft, the Havoc's operational impact remained undeniable. Its presence had shaped battle outcomes across multiple continents. In North Africa, it had been instrumental in the campaign against Rommel's forces, striking supply lines and artillery positions that hindered the Afrika Korps' advance. Allied ground forces credited the A-20 with softening defenses before infantry assaults, allowing coordinated strikes that minimized casualties. In the Pacific, it had been equally essential, enabling the Allies to neutralize Japanese airfields, disrupt shipping, and maintain air superiority in contested regions. The A-20's versatility extended beyond theater-specific tactics. It had been adapted for night operations, reconnaissance, pathfinding, and specialized bombardment missions. The British Royal Air Force, operating the Boston variant, deployed it extensively in night intruder roles, targeting German bombers as they returned from raids and disrupting supply lines across occupied Europe. Soviet crews, flying Lend-Lease aircraft on the Eastern Front, leveraged its reliability in freezing winter conditions, striking German troop concentrations, railways, and fuel depots with precision. In every environment, the Havoc performed its assigned tasks with a combination of durability, agility, and operational reliability that few aircraft of comparable size could match. A defining aspect of the A-20's legacy lay in the human element it supported. Pilots, gunners, and ground crews relied on its design for both survival and mission success. Accounts from veteran squadrons often emphasized the aircraft's forgiving flight characteristics, which allowed even less experienced pilots to carry out complex attack runs with a higher likelihood of returning safely. Ground crews praised its straightforward maintenance, modular components, and engine reliability, which enabled sustained operations under primitive or hostile conditions. In many cases, the difference between life and death for crews depended on the aircraft's rugged design, a feature that elevated the A-20 from a mere tool to a lifeline. The Havoc's service also reflected the technological and strategic evolution of air combat during World War II. At the outset, it was conceived as a light attack aircraft, capable of tactical bombing and reconnaissance. Yet through successive iterations, the A-20G, A-20J, and later specialized variants, it adapted to the changing demands of warfare. By 1944, the aircraft had been modified with forward-firing guns, radar systems, and enhanced bomb loads, allowing it to assume roles that were initially unforeseen. Its adaptability underscored a key lesson in military aviation: flexibility and reliability could outweigh raw firepower or strategic glamour. The aircraft's operational record reinforced this principle. In the Pacific, A-20s conducted thousands of sorties over New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, and the Philippines. They executed low-altitude strafing runs against Japanese shipping and airfields, striking with lethal precision while minimizing exposure to anti-aircraft fire. In Europe, Havocs supported preparatory operations for D-Day, targeting transportation networks and coastal defenses to disrupt German reinforcements. Night missions in France and the Low Countries, executed in the Boston variant, demonstrated the aircraft's capacity to operate in adverse conditions, including poor weather and blackout restrictions, often under the cover of darkness. Despite these achievements, the A-20 remained overshadowed in popular memory. Its successes were tactical rather than strategic, often invisible to journalists and propagandists who focused on headline-grabbing bombing campaigns or acrobatic fighter duels. Yet the contributions of the Havoc were critical. Its missions enabled other aircraft to operate more effectively, protected ground forces during amphibious landings, and disrupted enemy operations in ways that cumulatively shaped the outcome of battles and campaigns. Without the A-20 performing its quiet, methodical work, many larger operations may have suffered greater casualties or delays. The legacy of the A-20 is also evident in its design influence on subsequent aircraft. The aircraft's emphasis on speed, maneuverability, and multi-role functionality foreshadowed post-war tactical bombers and light attack aircraft. Lessons learned from its operational deployment informed the development of the Douglas A-26 Invader, which incorporated heavier armament, improved aerodynamics, and greater payload capacity while retaining the Havoc's core principles of versatility and reliability. The transition from A-20 to A-26 illustrates how innovation in wartime production created a lineage of aircraft optimized for adaptability rather than spectacle. For the men who flew the A-20, its legacy remained personal and enduring. Veteran memoirs frequently recount missions in which the aircraft's capabilities directly determined survival. Pilots recalled executing low-level attacks on entrenched positions, dodging flak bursts and enemy fighters, and returning home to find that minor mechanical failures could have been catastrophic in other aircraft. Gunners described the aircraft's defensive layout as forgiving, enabling them to fend off interceptors while maintaining offensive effectiveness. These personal accounts reinforce a broader truth: the A-20's excellence was measured not by fame, but by reliability and operational success under extreme conditions. Preservation efforts, though limited, provide tangible connections to this legacy. Museums across the United States, Australia, and Europe maintain surviving examples of the A-20, often restored to display configurations reflecting their wartime appearance. Visitors observe the compact fuselage, twin radial engines, and gun placements that defined its role in combat. Each rivet, panel, and scar tells a story of missions flown in hostile skies, the countless sorties that were completed, and the airmen who depended on this unassuming yet vital aircraft. The aircraft's silent impact also extended to the broader trajectory of the war. By providing consistent, precise, and reliable support across multiple theaters, the A-20 freed heavier bombers and fighters to focus on strategic objectives. Its operations contributed to the interdiction of supply lines, the disruption of enemy logistics, and the direct support of ground offensives. These outcomes, though often unheralded, cumulatively influenced the pace and success of Allied campaigns. In retrospect, the Douglas A-20 Havoc exemplifies a wartime paradox: an aircraft can be both ubiquitous and invisible, essential yet underrecognized. Its absence from public acclaim does not diminish its historical importance. On the contrary, the A-20 represents the unsung backbone of Allied air power, the aircraft that performed the countless tactical missions without which broader victories might have been delayed or jeopardized. By the time the war ended, over 7,000 A-20s had been produced and flown in combat. They had traversed nearly every continent and ocean, surviving extreme environmental conditions, enemy fire, and operational stress. Yet most of these aircraft were swiftly retired, and only a few remain today as static displays. Despite this, the A-20's imprint on the course of the war, its contributions to tactical air support, night operations, and low-level precision attacks, endures in historical records, veteran testimony, and operational analysis. Ultimately, the Douglas A-20 Havoc's legacy is a testament to the value of reliability, adaptability, and service over recognition. It proved that tactical effectiveness could shape battles as profoundly as headline-grabbing strategic raids. Its story reminds historians and aviation enthusiasts alike that greatness in warfare is not measured solely by fame, but by consistent performance under fire, the ability to survive and complete missions, and the quiet courage of those who trusted it to carry them safely through the dangers of combat. The A-20 may not have dominated headlines or adorned posters, but its contributions were inseparable from Allied success in World War II. Its legacy, preserved in photographs, veteran recollections, and surviving airframes, offers a vivid illustration of an aircraft that performed flawlessly in the shadow of history's most celebrated warbirds. For historians, pilots, and aviation enthusiasts, the A-20 Havoc remains the ultimate example of a combat aircraft whose value was measured not in fame, but in unwavering service, operational excellence, and enduring reliability.